Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I am back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation I received over the past 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if any questions relate to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, I've been in a caloric deficit for 12 weeks and the scale has stopped moving. How do I know if I actually need fewer calories or if I just need more patience? If you've been in a caloric deficit for a prolonged period of time, chances are that you don't need to reduce your calories even further if you stop losing weight. Okay. What happens when you're working in a severe caloric deficit for weeks on end? Your metabolism does start to slow down. Okay. Your overall energy output backs off a little bit. And the reason for that is your body goes into survival mode. Our bodies are very resilient. And this is why I always advise my clients not to starve themselves when they're trying to lose weight. Because if you starve yourself when you're trying to lose weight, or you do too much cardio when you're trying to lose weight, what happens when you hit a plateau like this person has? Right? Do you do more cardio? Do you reduce your calories even more and starve yourself even more? So you're asking for what I call metabolic massacre. All right. The trick here is to land the plane slowly. All right. Reduce your calories slowly, increase your cardio slowly. All right. But if you do things too fast, too soon, or do things for too long, you're asking for trouble. All right. So, you talked about how you're in a caloric deficit for 12 weeks. I mean, that's 3 months. I'm assuming you haven't had any cheat meals, maybe you haven't had any refeed meals. You mentioned that you are, but with all the people I work with online, when I do their nutritional plans, I always ask them to have one cheat meal or one refeed meal at least once a week. Okay. And I talked about in the past how I don't give everyone cheat meals because sometimes cheat meals can be detrimental for somebody's psyche. So I say, okay, no problem. Have something on the diet, but just have more of it. Don't even like, for example, like maybe one meal, don't even measure your portions. Or instead of having 1 cup of rice, have 2 cups of rice. Or instead of having 1 tablespoon of peanut butter, have 3 tablespoons of peanut butter. Just something where I want you a little bit more in a caloric surplus from what I have you doing for the other 6 days of the week. All right. So one day we're going to go into a little bit of a caloric surplus or even maintenance level. Okay. What that does, it kind of resets the body a little bit, both mentally and physically. Okay. So it's not that I feel that cheat meals are essential. It's that I feel that every once in a while, it's good to boost your calories. It's good to take your foot off the gas, reduce your cardio, let your cortisol levels go down so your body can readjust, relax, and then you go back into it. It's the same thing when I tell people I think everyone should take at least one day off from training a week. Even though I don't necessarily take days off from the gym because I like working out, but I'll even have one day where maybe I don't push as hard. Okay. So if I do take a day off from the gym, or if I don't take a day off from the gym, the day I don't take off, I might just give maybe 60% in the gym. I don't go 100%. Okay. So there's something to be said about doing deloading workouts. I don't recommend doing deloading weeks where you go easy for a whole week, but every once in a while, it's okay to take your foot off the gas and give yourself a little bit of an easier workout, a little bit easier training session, back off the diet a little bit, maybe skip a day of cardio, whatever it is, because it's going to be good for you mentally and physically. So it's like a reset for your body. All right. So that I feel is essential. So to answer that question, if you stop losing weight, the answer is not necessarily reduce your calories more. The answer is not necessarily do more cardio. All right. The answer could be actually increase your cardios, maybe take 2 or 3 days off from cardio altogether. All right. Give your body a chance to reset. It's difficult for me to answer questions like this because if I don't work with you in person, I don't know what you're doing with your diet. I don't know what you're doing with your training or your supplementation. So, if you want to give me more information, DM me if you're interested in working with me online and have an online coach that can maybe tweak your nutritional plan, see what you're currently doing, your training program, and get you back on track. Okay. Because I can promise you that 9 times out of 10, the answer is not reducing your calories more or increasing your cardio more, especially if you've been in a caloric deficit for a severe or sorry, for quite a severe period of time. In this case, 3 months is quite a long time. Or if you're doing too much cardio, okay? And I know some people that go up to like 2 hours cardio a day. That to me is extreme. And again, you're just spinning your wheels at that point. You really are, all right? Because it's not sustainable. And again, if it's not sustainable, it will not be successful long term. All right. Next question. Nick, I train hard 5 days a week, hit my protein levels, and sleep 7, 8 hours a night, but I still look soft. What are the most common reasons someone isn't getting leaner despite doing everything right? Well, you mentioned you hit your protein levels, but what about your carbohydrates and your fats? This is key. I talked about last week how I believe protein is the most overrated macronutrient. Everyone talks about, I got to get my protein in, got to get my protein in. But when you talk about carbohydrates, you go, you got to be careful on the carbs. You don't want to consume too much carbs, so you're gonna get fat. And people sometimes tend to neglect fats themselves, like actual healthy fats, because they're afraid that fats will make them fat, carbs will make them fat. But protein, we need protein. Like, you probably don't need as much protein as you might think you need. Okay. The average person who, even if you work out 5 days a week, you're not a bodybuilder per se where you're competing. So you don't need extreme amounts of protein. Even myself at 210 pounds, I've taken about 210 grams of protein a day. That's it. Okay. When I was dieting for the show I did 2 months ago, I took my protein was even less. Okay, because you don't really need as much protein as people tend to think or people are told. Okay, it's not like your body's going to go into this extreme catabolic state if you don't hit your protein levels. All right. You also have to look at your carbs and your fats. So in your case, if you're feeling like you're soft, your carbs might be too high. All right. So if you're having too many carbs, it's not that you're necessarily going to get fat, but you're going to retain water. I was talking about this with a client earlier today who sent me a question because she's getting ready for a certain event and she doesn't want to hold water for this particular event. And she said, well, what do I do with my proteins and my fats? I'm like, it's not your proteins and your fats you have to watch, it's your carbohydrates. And I'm not necessarily telling you to take out your carbs. However, I might recommend reducing your carbohydrates because carbs act like a sponge. So the more carbs you have, the more water you're going to retain. When I diet down people for shows, competitions, weddings, whatever it may be, and I start to decrease their carbohydrates as they get closer to the event, the so-called peak week, like the last 5 or 6 days, what I tend to do is I decrease their carbs, increase their proteins, increase their fats so that they're not starving, but at the same time, they're not retaining that much fluid. Because as I said, carbs hold water. Fats and protein don't hold water. Okay. So what people notice, the first thing notice when they go on this type of nutrition plan, when I switch things around like that, they're peeing every hour because they're drinking water and it's going right through them, right? Another thing to notice is they drop 2 or 3 pounds within a day or two, but it's water weight. Okay. So I always explain to them, you're not losing fat, it's water weight. Okay. It's the same thing we do for bodybuilding competitions. The last 4 or 5 days before a show, we start to reduce our carbohydrates and we start to increase our fats, increase our protein, and then we do a carb up about 24 to 48 hours before we step on stage. Okay. So I kind of, everyone's different, obviously. And also if you're working with man or woman, whatever, but I kind of follow the same protocol when I work with people who are getting ready for a particular event. All right. So what I'll say to you is if you're looking soft, there's a good chance that your carbs are too high, or you're having certain meals that are going into what I call a carb surplus. So, for example, if you're someone who's very sensitive to carbs, a lot of people are. I personally am not. I work with a lot of people who are not sensitive to carbs, but there's a lot more people out there who are sensitive to carbs. They look at carbs, they retain water. Okay. I don't think complex carbohydrates make you fat. I think being in a caloric surplus will make someone fat for sure, especially if they're not moving. Okay. If they're living a sedentary lifestyle. But if you're consuming complex carbohydrates and you're working out 5 to 7 days a week, whether it's with weights or cardio, I really don't think you're going to get fat. What happens though is you get that kind of soft look because you have those carbs, so you're going to retain that extra fluid. So if you want to reduce that, my recommendation is to monitor your carbohydrate intake. So let's say you're doing 200 grams of carbs a day. That might be too much for your body type. Your body type might respond better to doing 150 carbs per day. But if you don't want to lose muscle, you want to make sure that both your protein and your fat's in check too. Okay. So you just want to make sure that you are keeping those levels relatively high. So always remember that it's not necessarily that you're soft because you're fat. If you're doing everything right and you still have like that soft kind of doughy look, it's a chance that your carbs are just too high and your body's sensitive to carbohydrates. And if that's the case, I do recommend not necessarily following a ketosis diet, although I'm not against ketosis diets necessarily. I mean, I am when it comes to building muscle and losing fat, but I think ketosis diets can be fairly healthy. But I think if you are someone who's sensitive to carbs, you want to follow a moderate carbohydrate diet and keep your fats and your proteins relatively high. All right. That usually works for most people I work with who are sensitive to carbs. All right. And I usually find that works especially well for women because when I work with women and men, I find that women tend to be a little bit more sensitive to carbohydrates than men. And women actually tend to respond better to a higher fat, higher protein, lower carbohydrate diet. Whereas the guys, depending on the guy, I can usually give the guys a little bit more carbs, lower their fats, keep protein levels moderate throughout the day, and they respond well to that. Okay. So it really just comes down to who I'm working with, gender related, lifestyle related, fitness level. Am I working with someone who is morbidly obese? Am I working with someone who is already in shape, but now it's getting even better shape? Am I working with someone who's already at 10% body fat, but wants to bring down to 3% body fat? So it really depends on the person I'm working with. But again, across the board, If someone is doing everything right, they're checking all their boxes, yet they still have that soft kind of doughy look, it's usually their carbs are too high. So I'll bring those carbs down, elevate their fats, elevate their proteins. They harden up. All right. Okay. Nick, when trying to build muscle, is it better to push every set to failure or leave a few reps in the tank? How do you personally approach this? I think in the last two or three Q&As, I've had questions about train to failure. And I've talked about how I'm not a firm believer in train to failure. I think the risks outweigh the benefits. All right. I really do. Because I feel like if you're trained to true failure, you start those last two or three reps, you're really putting a lot of stress on your tendons and your joints and your ligaments. So I've always believed in keeping the tension on the muscle belly. Now, that comes with years and years of experience because if you are training, let's say you're doing an incline barbell bench press, when I do an incline barbell bench press, I always focus on bringing that bar right down to my chest. Okay. The reason I do that is because I want to practice full mobility, full flexibility, and I want to get the most out of the muscle. Okay. If I'm doing a barbell bench press, but I'm only going halfway down and going back up like this, I'm not utilizing full range of motion. So I'm not really contracting pectoralis major in this case. I'm using more anterior delts. And actually, I'm probably using more of my joints and my actual muscles in my delts because the range of motion is so limited. All right. So the reason I'm using that as an example is because when you're doing any movement, the first rule of thumb should be full range of motion. Form, technique, full range of motion on every exercise, not the weight. All right. Especially if you're training for aesthetics, if you're trying to build a solid, lean, dense physique, all right, and you're trying to define and refine the muscle bellies, sculpt the muscle bellies, it's not about the weight. Okay. It's about utilizing full range of motion and make sure that you are practicing proper form and executing proper technique. All right. The weight is secondary. The weight is always secondary. All right. So when it comes to that, it's not about training necessarily to failure. I always find for me, if I stick in that 10 to 15 rep range, that works wonders for me. It always has because A, I've been able to get great results with my physique and I've been injury free for 25 plus years. And that's the same protocol I use with all my clients. I've had people come work with me in the past and say, well, I like doing lower reps. I'm like, I'm not going to stop you. If you want to do lower reps, do it. But you're asking me from my years of training the average sedentary individual or even athletes, everyone, I would say, general population, what works best? Double digits work best. All right. That 10 to 15 rep range. Still leaving a little bit in the tank. So if I get someone doing, say, 12 reps on a last set, yeah, they probably could get one, maybe two more reps. But would they be good reps? Would they be sloppy reps? Would I be doing most of the lifting for them if I'm spotting them and I'm the one lifting the bar? So I don't believe in that. All right. I think it's better to work smarter and not necessarily harder in the gym. So if I'm getting someone to do, let's say, 12 reps of a dumbbell shoulder press, and I'm getting them to do that with, say, I don't know, 60-pound dumbbells. I get that 12th rep and maybe that the last, three quarters of the way up, I'm helping them get that last rep. That to me, the set is done. We're not going to go for another rep. But what I might do is say, okay, drop those 60s, pick up the 30s, let's do a drop set. Because I know they can still give me another maybe 8 to 12 reps on a drop set. And that's when I will use single digits on a drop set. All right. Sometimes I'll go down to 8 reps on a drop set. But usually I try to get my clients to aim between that 10 to 15 rep range, okay, for most, if not all exercises. And I find that works really well. All right. So again, I know I get a lot of questions about train to failure. I'm not a firm believer in doing that. I really think you're asking for problems, especially long term, especially as you get older, when you have aging muscles, aging joints, more wear and tear on the body. Remember, the older you get, the more mileage you put on your body. So you're really putting yourself at risk of long-term injuries by train to failure. So the goal, I'm going to quote the great Lee Haney, one of my favorite Mr. Olympias of all time. The goal is to stimulate the muscles, not annihilate the joints, the tendons, and the ligaments. All right. Okay. Nick, I've gained 15 pounds during my muscle building phase, but I'm worried a lot of it is body fat. How can you tell the difference between a productive bulk and just getting fat? I do get this question a lot, and I think I'm always confused when people ask me it because I'm like, how do you not know if you're getting fat? Like, to me, it's pretty simple. Fat jiggles. Water doesn't jiggle. So if you're holding water weight, it's not jiggling. It's just, you can see it. There's like a film of water covering your abs. You can just see the water. It's in your face. You might feel bloated one day, right? Especially, let's say you go out drinking one night, you wake up and you're a little bit bloated, right? Your body's retaining water. You can put on fat, but fat is very different. Fat jiggles, right? So it's pretty simple to tell if you're putting on fat. But when it comes to bulking or putting on muscle, the rule of thumb that I've always used, even to this day, I've always said, as long as I can see my abs, I'm good. The day that I can't see my abs, I'm in trouble. All right. And then I know, okay, I need to back off the food a little bit. And there's been times like that where I'm on a so-called bulk. We'll take the show that I just did 2 months ago. After that show, I started increasing my calories gradually, week by week. Okay, it was a controlled refeed, controlled bulk. And I went from consuming, I don't know what my calorie intake was because I don't count calories, but I was watching my macronutrient intake, I should say, which obviously translates to caloric intake. But say for the contest, I was doing 150 grams of carbs per day. Post show, I slowly bumped that up to 175 per day for week one. Then I brought it up to 200 a day for week two. Then I brought it to 250 week three, and so on. And now I'm doing like 600 grams of carbs a day. And that works really well for my body. Okay. But I also know that if I bring my too much, if I start to increase my calories or my carbohydrates or my fats too much, I am going to retain some body fat. Because again, if you are in a caloric surplus or a macronutrient surplus and you're not exerting enough energy, you're not burning enough calories throughout the day, or you don't have enough muscle to support that caloric intake, you're going to get put on body fat. Those calories are going to get stored as body fat, period. All right. So I've always said to my clients I work with when I'm helping them put on muscle, send me progress photos. I can tell in those progress photos just by looking at them if the weight they're putting on is quality weight. If it's not, I back down a little bit. Not for good though. So if I'm working with someone who's on an off-season plan, bodybuilder, I work with a lot of women and men. We're trying to put on size in the off season. So the goal is to increase macronutrients gradually, but keep a watchful eye to make sure that we're not tipping over the scale. I don't mean tipping over the scale on the number on the scale. I mean tipping over the scale is in the body fat, the body composition. So you have to have a trained eye to really watch that and say, oh, you know what? We're going to back down on your carbs a little bit, but we're still going to keep your fats and protein high, but we're still going to push it, but we're going to watch those carbs for a few weeks. And then as you start to continue to grow, because you're still going to grow, especially if your protein and fat is relatively high, you're still going to grow. Then I'll start bumping those carbs up again, and maybe I'll decrease your fats. So that's why I'm a firm believer in rotating macronutrients. All right. And you ask anyone who works with me on a weekly basis, yeah, on a nutritional plan, I always make revisions to their plans by rotating their macronutrients. That's how I make my revisions. I don't necessarily take foods out and add new foods in and do all this magical hoopla that people just try to sell you on their nutritional plans or for clickbait and do this, do that. I keep it very simple. All right. I look at the results they've achieved in the week. I'm like, all right, you know what? We need to back off your carbs. I look at your progress photos. We need to increase your fats. Maybe we need to lower your proteins, whatever it may be. We have to increase your cardio, decrease your cardio. I want you to have an extra cheat meal this week. Again, it depends on the person's results that they're achieving or not achieving on a weekly basis. All right. So, I mean, to answer that question, to me, it's pretty simple. If you're taking progress photos, which I would imagine if you are serious about putting on muscle or serious about losing fat, you should, especially in this day and age, I mean, you have your camera phone, be taking progress photos. You don't have to put them up on social media. You just have them for yourself. My clients send me progress photos on a weekly basis. Some of my clients send me progress photos twice a week, depending on, what they're training for. And I monitor that and I compare their photos. And then I see the changes, or if I don't see changes, then I'll make drastic changes. But I'm a firm believer in looking at progress photos, especially if you are trying to transform and change body composition. Because if you're trying to do that, guess what? That's all visual. Okay, so screw all these fancy apps and the number on the scale and don't overcomplicate shit. Photos. Okay, it's going to tell you. And if you yourself have a hard time really critiquing your physique, work with a coach or have a close friend who's not going to bullshit you. Send them the photos and they can actually critique you. All right. But I always tell my clients, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. If I don't feel that you're progressing, I'll let you know because I take responsibility for that as well. That's on me too as the coach. I'm like, all right, well, we're not progressing the way that I want you to progress. So we're going to change this, this, this. All right. And, I always tell clients, I'm not going to bullshit you. If you're looking great, I'm going to tell you you're looking great. If you could look better, I'm going to tell you you could look better. Okay. Because that's what they're paying me for, to help them. Okay. Especially my clients who are trying to transform their physique. So why would I bullshit them? I don't. Okay. I don't give positive reinforcement when it's not necessary. Okay. The goal is to get the job done. And in order to do that, we have to monitor the physique on a weekly basis. All right. Okay. Nick, why do some people seem to build muscle everywhere except one stubborn body part? Is it genetics, exercise selection, effort, or something else? I would say it's a combination of all three. A lot of times, God, I feel that I trained my ass off when I used to compete. And even to this day, I still train really hard in the gym. Whatever I did, though, I just could not grow my back. My back was always a lagging muscle group for me, always. I could do 3 sets of squats and my legs would grow. No problem. I had no problem with my legs ever. My legs just grew. People ask me all the time, what do you do for your legs? I'm like, I just squat and lunge. That's it. No machine. Squat, lunge. That's all I do. And they grew. But my back, my God, I would just do everything. I would do pull downs. I would do chin ups. I would do deadlifts. Like every back exercise you can imagine, I've done it. And no matter what, every time I stepped on stage, judges like, you need to improve your back. You need to improve your back. And so I'm like, it drove me nuts because I knew that. I wasn't delusional. I knew I had a weaker back. And so for me, I gave it everything I could. I did every exercise I could, but my genetics just did not allow me to get that massive, thick V taper that you see a lot of guys get. But I had other strengths, and those strengths were like in my legs or in my chest or in my delts. Okay. So I feel that, like, for every weak body part, there's a strong body part. All right. So we all have what we call our genetic deficiencies. We all do, right? Nobody's perfect. I've never seen a bodybuilder, except for maybe Ronnie Coleman, step on stage who was just like a genetic specimen. Everything was perfect. Okay, very rarely have I seen that. Everyone has, their shortcomings. So for a lot of people, it is their genetics. Now, I always tell clients, I'm like, rather than work against your genetics, work with your genetics. Assess your physique, or have your trainer or your coach assess your physique. Understand your strengths, understand your weaknesses. You can prioritize your weaknesses so you can give them more volume, give them more attention to detail, give them more exercise selection. All right. Train them at the beginning of the week after a rest day so you have more energy, as opposed at the end of the week where maybe you've done 3 or 4 workouts and now you're tired. Train your stronger body parts at the end of the week, right? Obviously, you don't need to train them as hard. Still train them, don't neglect them, but still train them. So you want to prioritize your weaker muscle groups. All right. So to answer that question, it's, in my opinion, for most people, especially for people who do train and they try everything like I did, it's a genetic deficiency. But at the same time, I've never met anyone who doesn't have something that I'm like, wow, that's a great body part. Even my clients, I'm like, wow, I wish I had your biceps, your long head, the way your brachialis connects to your elbow. I wish I had that. You know what I mean? And that's just your genetics. They just have it naturally. So everyone's got their strengths and everyone has their weaknesses. Now, sometimes it is a lack of effort. Yeah, I've seen some people go to the gym and they play on their phone. Yeah, in their case, it's probably a lack of effort. They're not trained hard enough. Or I've had some people tell me that they only give it like 40 or 50% in the gym. I'm like, well, what the hell's the point of that? I understand every once in a while that's okay, but if you're going to the gym every day and you're training at like 40 to 50% of intensity, I'm like, you're just wasting your time. Why bother? Okay. I've said this before. That saying, there's no such thing as a bad workout. And I always say it, that's not true. There's a lot of shitty workouts, and I see them all the time. If you're on your phone in the gym, that's a shitty workout. If you're only giving 40 to 50% intensity every time you walk in that gym, that's a shitty workout. To me, you might as well just stay at home because you're not going to progress. Right. So to answer that question, in my opinion, for people out there who are training hard and doing everything you can, do not give up. Keep trying new things. Work with some coaches. Maybe someone else has another idea. Like, there's people that have come to work with me who've been training for years. Like, I just, no matter what I do, I can't make my butt grow. And I'll assess their squat. I'll assess the way they do hip thrusts, walking lunges. I'll tweak a few things, and boom, now we're back on track. So sometimes it also helps working with a coach, someone who has experience and knows anatomy and physiology and understands your body type. And so, what, you're a little bit shorter. So you might actually respond better to front squats versus back squats, or you might respond better to hack squats than leg press. So having someone who understands anatomy and physiology can help tweak that program for you as well. All right. So I would say it's a combination of three for some people, but for those who are working hard, it's a genetic deficiency. And for those that are just not working hard at all, well, yeah, it's a lack of effort for sure. Okay. Okay. I lost my spot here. Oh, here we go. Okay. Nick, I've heard that building muscle gets significantly harder after the age of 40. How much of that is actually true, and how much is just an excuse people use? Yeah, so here's the thing. We know that, God, I would say even after the age of 25 in men, testosterone levels start to go down with age. We know that, right? But my argument to that is, well, what about a man who is exercising daily, follows a clean diet, doesn't smoke, rarely drinks, maybe socially? What happens to that man? And the reason I ask that is because these case studies that they do are on the average sedentary individual. And I always tell my clients this when they're looking at their blood work. I'm like, you have to remember, these markers or these metrics that they're using is for the average sedentary person. Because if you were to look at as a whole, the population, the people that actually go to the gym and exercise. And I mean like exercise. I don't mean go to the gym and play on their phone. I mean people who go to the gym religiously and train. All right. It's very small. I would say it's less than 20%. All right. Yeah, you have those people who go to the gym and maybe do some light cardio or a Zumba class or whatever. And that's good. They're moving, but they're not really exercising. Okay. So I'm talking about the people, the diehards, all right, who go there, they have a game plan, they know what they're training, they understand how to train shoulders, back, chest, they understand what they're doing. Okay. So those people are very few and far in between. But because of that, it's important that if you fall within that 20% of the population, that you don't really pay close attention to those metrics that are designed for the average sedentary individual. All right. It's like the body fat percentage test that people seem to follow online, which I've always said is ridiculous because basically that metric is based on your height and your weight. Well, I hate to break it to you. I'm 5'10". I'm 210 pounds. According to the BMI, I'm morbidly obese. I don't think I'm fat. All right. But I pack a lot of muscle for my size. So the BMI is irrelevant to me. And it's irrelevant to the 20% of people who do pack a lot of muscle, both men and women. All right. So you have to be very careful when you're paying attention to those metrics. And the same thing I tell people when they look at their blood work and they're looking at, I have clients that send me their blood work and they're saying, oh my God, my creatine levels or my creatinine levels are so high and they're abnormal. What am I going to do? I'm like, it's because you work out with weights. Of course they're going to be high. Of course your creatine levels are going to be high. Of course your creatinine levels are going to be high. You work out with weights on a regular basis. Like, but again, for the average person that doesn't do this, those levels, if they're just naturally high, that would be somewhat alarming because, like, well, why are your creatine levels high if you don't even go to a gym and lift a weight? That to me would be a red flag. Something else is going on. All right. But if I see someone's blood work and I'm like, yeah, no, that's fine. Or I have other clients that have gone to get their blood pressure taken at like a local drugstore after a workout, and then they send me a text message going, my blood pressure is through the roof. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm like, you just did a workout. Of course your blood pressure is going to be like you have to really pay attention to these metrics. Okay. So some metrics are good, but in my opinion, you got to be very careful when you follow them yourself. So when someone says to me after the age of 40, oh, it's going to get hard. Listen, I'm 40 years old right now. All right. I turned 40 this year. I feel better at 40 than I did at 20. I have more energy. Okay. I think more clearly. My workouts are better. I have a higher libido. These are all things that I believe are caused from working out on a regular basis, regular exercise. I get my blood work done twice a year. Everything looks good. All right. My testosterone levels slightly elevated. What am I going to do about that? I lift weights on a regular basis. So should I reduce the amount of I lift weights? I'm not going to, because when I have a doctor who, and I'm not trying to fat shame somebody, but when I have a doctor who has a belly telling me, oh, well, you need to reduce your testosterone levels because you're at risk of stroke or heart attack. And I look at those levels, I'm like, yeah, they might be 10 points higher than the average sedentary person. But again, what am I going to do? Just stop working out? Because, and I look at the side effects of that, I'm like, no, because then my cholesterol levels might go up, my blood pressure might really go up, and I might have other red flags that start to happen. Obesity being one of them, right? So I don't want to have any of these health issues. So of course, I'm going to continue to work out. So what if my testosterone levels are a little high? Am I worried about stroke or heart attack? Not really. I mean, I could still get that even if my testosterone levels were low. So like, you have to be very careful when you listen to this I call generic bullshit. All right. And I feel that when people start believing that themselves and say, wow, now that I'm this old, I got to be careful. I'm like, yeah, you're putting limitations on yourself and you're playing the victim card. And as soon as you start putting limitations on yourself, you've already set yourself up to fail. So I don't believe that. No, when someone tells me you can't put on muscle because you're 40, I'm like, no, I mean, I look at bodybuilders who are in, like getting in their late 40s, and yeah, of course, they're, you know, age is catching up with them. So maybe they're not putting on the same amount of muscle that they were in their 20s, but they still look great. So I wouldn't necessarily say that now someone's getting older, they're going to start necessarily losing a bunch of muscle. I mean, there's a lot of bodybuilders from the 70s who are still alive today who still train every day and they still look great. Look at Robbie Robinson. I think he's like 80, 82. He still looks fantastic. So a lot of these guys still practice what they preach. So I just think that there hasn't been enough long-term studies on people who train with weights on a regular basis to really know where the limitations are. I really don't. Because again, I train clients. I've talked about how I have some clients in their 60s who, God, these guys and women, they look better than people in their 20s. Okay. I mean, they have low body fat levels, lots of muscle, lots of energy, are in the gym at 6 in the morning. So I'm like, am I going to say, oh, yeah, well, because that person's 65, they shouldn't be doing what that person at 25 is doing? I don't believe that because I see it every day. And I see people who are 25 who can barely walk up a flight of stairs, right? And they've got all these joint issues and they've got all these like health issues because they're living a sedentary lifestyle. So I do think age is a number, and I do think that maybe in 20 years from now we'll know more because I don't think there's enough case studies done on the 20% of the population that does exercise daily and does take care of themselves and doesn't smoke or don't smoke and don't really drink and follow a clean diet. So I think if we were to follow those people and see how they're aging, I think it'd be a hell of a lot better than the people who don't. All right. So yeah, to answer that question, no, I don't believe that because you're 40, you can't put on muscle or you can't lose body fat. All right. Or that you should take it easy. Bullshit. All right. Okay. We've got one more question here. I saw it. Where'd it go? Uh, Nick, what's the biggest mistake you see people make when transitioning from a fat loss phase into a muscle building phase? Oh, there's a few. I think what happens for a lot of people, and I've been guilty of this myself, when you're following an extreme caloric deficit for a prolonged period of time, all right, you start to fantasize about foods. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times that when I was getting ready for shows over the years, I start watching the Food Network. And I don't even know why, because I'm not like a food person. It's not like I crave certain foods. I'm pretty boring with my diet. I don't even like eating. I hate it. To me, it's a chore. But because I was constantly hungry, I was fantasizing about all these foods I want to eat after the diet. And I think I talked about this after my first show. I went on a full out like 2 week binge of all these foods that I never rarely ate anyway. But I was having pizza, I was having ice cream, I was having burgers, I was having French fries, I was having pasta, and I felt like shit. And also, I put on a lot of weight. Most of it was water weight, but I just didn't feel good. I felt very lethargic. I was just my energy levels were low. And you think, wow, you're gonna feel amazing with all this food. But what I learned was like, no, the body actually operates better on less food. It does. So what I took from that lesson was that after my next show, I'm like, well, I don't want that to happen again. And it had nothing about putting on fat. It was more about just I didn't want to feel like that again. So then I really did my research on reverse dieting and controlled rebound dieting, controlled bulks, getting your weight back up, but making sure that the weight you're putting on is quality weight and ensuring that the weight you're putting on is purely muscle, not fat. Okay. In order to do this, you have to gradually increase your calories, gradually increase your carbohydrates, your fats, and your proteins. So to me, that was actually even harder because you're hungry and you just want to start eating food, but you have to control. You have to have control. You have to have discipline because if you don't, you're going to go on an all-out binge. Your insulin levels are very sensitive after you followed an extreme diet for a prolonged period of time. Okay, you ask anyone who's ever trained for a bodybuilding competition or a particular sporting event, maybe even a wedding, whatever it may be, a photo shoot, they'll tell you when the diet's over, as soon as they start eating regularly again, like, larger portions, they're constantly hungry. They think they're hungry. It's because their insulin levels are very sensitive right now. Their blood sugar levels could be very low. So that's when I try to really tell my clients, we need to do a controlled bulk to get you back into where you were before, but still have a healthy relationship with food. That's very important. All right. So we don't just want to start eating for the sake of eating. And I can't tell you the amount of times I've done shows where people are backstage eating donuts and cakes. And I'm like, I never did that. I never did that because I'm like, why would I do that? I just did all this hard work. Why do I want to reward myself with shit food? Okay. The only thing I want to do after a show, come home, have a shower, have a regular meal, maybe have a little bit more food than I've had in the last like 12 weeks. But I just want to have like a good, solid, clean meal. Go to sleep, get a good night's sleep, wake up, go train. And now I have a little bit more energy because I've had a little bit more food, but not crazy amount more food, just a little bit more food. So I think the biggest mistake I see is people just trying to just be gluttons and eat everything and anything they possibly can and just think, well, I'm going to take advantage of the anabolic window. And I'm going to put on muscle. Mm-mm. Body doesn't work like that. Your body doesn't need all these carbohydrates and fats to just start putting on a bunch of muscle. Yes, you need to start increasing your caloric intake to put on the muscle, but not to ridiculous amounts or ridiculous extremes. It doesn't work like that, especially if you're a natural lifter, that which means you're not using PEDs, performance enhancement drugs. Okay. So again, biggest mistake I see is people go from a cut to a bulk too extreme. You need to be just as disciplined with that bulk by gradually increasing everything. Like I talked about one of the other questions, how I would increase my carbs in the last show, 50 grams per week. That was it, 50 grams of carbs per week. And then once I got up to where I feel good, which is for me is about 600 grams of carbs a day, That's where I feel good. Anything more, I start to feel very lethargic. So I knew for my body type right now, 600 grams, perfect. That's all I need. Okay. Which is a lot for a lot of people. But again, my body type is not sensitive to carbs. Could I have more carbs? Hey, listen, I'm a big eater. I used to eat 1,000 carbs a day. I'm happy I don't have to do that anymore, but I could do that. But I don't want to do that. All right. Because I do want to stay relatively lean. I don't, especially, as I am older now, not because I'm 40, but just because I'd have no reason to be this big 250-pound person. There's no reason for me to be that way. So I know what works for my body type. I don't know what works for your body type unless I work with you, but you have to find that line, and that line that you don't surpass it necessarily, where things start to get sloppy, where you start to put on love handles, or you start to feel very tired and you're sweating while you're just sitting or walking because you're eating so much food. So you have to be very careful. And this is why whenever I work with someone for a contest or for an event, I always leave them with a maintenance program. Always. Do they always follow it? Sometimes not. But people who worked with me for years, they do, because they've learned a lesson and they're like, yeah, you know what? I need to make sure that I come out of this diet. This, like, if I've been working with someone on a severe, like, caloric deficit, and I've been really pounding the cardio on them, and we're getting to the last final few weeks, I'm like, all right, well, here's your plan once the event's gone. This is what I want you to follow. It's going to contain more calories. It's going to contain less cardio, but I need you to follow this diet plan, and we're going to slowly bump things back up again. And for a lot of people, they can't do it. They're like, no, I just want to, like, go crazy. I'm like, well, all that hard work has been washed down the toilet now. So the biggest mistake I see is people just go all out binge and they lose control. All right. The more experience you have with these type of diets, though, I feel like the better it gets for a lot of people because they understand, and like, I don't want that to happen again, like in my case. All right. So if you are someone who is following an extreme or severe caloric deficit right now, and you're going to be coming out of it soon, maybe midsummer you're going to start eating more food again, make sure you are disciplined with your diet and it's a controlled rebound, or else you're going to have all kinds of problems. And I'm not just talking about body fat gain, your insulin receptors, your blood sugar levels, okay? You're going to feel like crap, okay? It's going to affect your hormones. You're going to have hormonal imbalances. So it's very important that you control and you have that discipline that you had while you were in a severe caloric deficit translates into now your caloric surplus, where you're eating more food to grow more muscle. All right. It's just as important. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, June the 22nd. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, a workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I truly do appreciate all the support and all the feedback that I receive from each and every single one of you. We're at 309 subscribers now. I really appreciate that. I've had quite a few people subscribe to my channel now that I'm posting more YouTube shorts. So it really motivates me to continue to do what I'm doing. And yeah, I want to educate people on health. I want to educate people on their dietary nutrition, their training programs, maybe pick up a few clients along the way, both online and in-house here in Vancouver, British Columbia. So I do appreciate all the support. Even if you don't work with me online or training and you just watch my content, I do appreciate the support. And a like and subscribe to the channel means a lot to me. Anyway, thank you all once again. And I will see you on later on this week on Wednesday for the Coaching Reality episode. Thank you and have a great day.